What would you do if your family disowned you at dinner? Then your phone rang with news that made them all go silent. I'm Maya, and 5 minutes after my parents cut me off for being a failure, my COO called me founder emeritus of a $120 million company, right in front of everyone who said I'd never amount to anything. Stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. I'm Maya Thompson. And she told me I'd never amount to anything. My own mother, standing in our family's pristine dining room, looking at me like I was some kind of disappointment she couldn't wait to get rid of. But here's the thing about family dinners when you're the black sheep. They have a funny way of turning into something you never saw coming. Because right in the middle of her telling me how I'd failed at life, my phone rang. And when I answered it, my COO's voice filled that dead silent room with 4 words that changed everything. Founder Emeritus. Just like that, in front of everyone who'd spent years writing me off. Now, before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment with where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, this one's worth sticking around for. Because what you're about to hear isn't just about proving people wrong, it's about what happens when the family that never believed in you suddenly realizes they might have made the biggest mistake of their lives. Let me back up for a second and tell you who I am. Maya Thompson, 29 years old, living in Boston. And if you asked my family to describe me, they'd probably use words like stubborn, difficult, or their personal favorite, disappointing. See, I come from what people call old money. The kind of family where your last name opens doors before you even knock, where Sunday dinners happen in dining rooms that cost more than most people's houses, where everyone knows exactly what's expected of them. Everyone except me. My father is one of those investment bankers who owns half of downtown Boston. My mother throws charity galas that make the society pages. My older brother just got promoted to senior partner at his firm, and my younger sister is engaged to someone who's probably going to run for Congress someday. And then there's me, the one who chose MIT over Harvard, the one who works 16-hour days in a cramped office space instead of a corner office in a skyscraper, the one who shows up to family events in jeans while everyone else is wearing designer suits. While my brother was climbing the corporate ladder and my sister was planning her picture-perfect wedding, I was the one who chose a different path. The tech world, startups, building something from nothing, and to my family that made me the black sheep. The disappointment, the one they'd rather not talk about at their country club. You want to know what it's like growing up in a family like that? Imagine being the only person at the dinner table who doesn't fit the mold. Every conversation becomes a reminder of how you're not living up to the family name. Every achievement gets dismissed because it's not the right kind of success. So when the invitation came for our annual family dinner, that familiar knot started forming in my stomach. You know the feeling, when you're about to walk into a room full of people who've already decided you don't measure up. I'd been dreading this dinner for weeks, rehearsing conversations in my head, preparing for the subtle digs about my career choices, getting ready to defend myself once again. But here's what they didn't know, what nobody knew. While they were busy writing me off, I'd been building something bigger than any of them could imagine. The company I'd started 3 years ago, SecureWell, wasn't just some little startup anymore. The late nights, the sacrifices, the times I ate ramen for dinner so I could reinvest every penny back into the business, they were all adding up to numbers that would make their investment portfolios look like pocket change. Just 2 weeks before this dinner, I'd gotten a call from my CFO. Our latest valuation had come in. The number was so big I had to ask him to repeat it twice. But I kept it quiet, kept it to myself. Maybe I wanted to see how long they'd keep treating me like the family failure. Maybe I was protecting myself from their judgment if things went south. Or maybe I just wasn't ready to prove them wrong yet. See, when you've been the disappointment for so long, there's this weird part of you that gets comfortable with it. It becomes your identity, and changing that identity, even for the better, feels scary. Either way, I had no idea that this dinner was going to be the night everything changed. That one phone call would turn their world upside down and finally give me the moment I'd been waiting for my entire life. To understand what happened that night, you need to know how I got here, how I became the family disappointment, and why that phone call changed everything. Growing up, Thompson meant everything was about image, about maintaining a reputation that took 3 generations to build. My father, Richard Thompson, built his empire as one of Boston's most ruthless investment bankers. The kind of guy who closes $100 million deals before breakfast and owns 3 houses he barely visits. He's the type who measures success by how many zeros are in your bank account and how often your name appears in the financial section of the Wall Street Journal. My mother, Catherine, well, she's what you'd call a professional socialite. Her full-time job is making sure our family looks perfect in the society pages. Every charity gala, every fundraiser, every photo op, she's there, making sure the Thompson name stays golden. She can tell you the net worth of every family in our social circle and exactly where we rank on Boston's unofficial wealth hierarchy. My older brother James followed the blueprint perfectly. Harvard undergrad with a 4.0 GPA, Wharton MBA with honors straight into investment banking at Goldman Sachs. He's everything my parents dreamed of. Smart, successful, and completely devoted to making money the traditional way. By the time he was 27, he was pulling in 7 figures and buying his first mansion in Beacon Hill. And my younger sister Sarah, she's the golden child, the one who can do no wrong. Graduated summa cum laude from Georgetown Law, landed a job at one of DC's most prestigious firms, and got engaged to a guy whose family practically owns half of Massachusetts politics. She's going to be a senator's wife before she's 35 and everyone knows it. Then, there was me. While they were all following the family playbook, I was the one asking why. Why do we have to do things the way they've always been done? Why can't success look different? Why does everything have to be about money and status? When it came time for college, they expected Harvard. The family tradition. The Thompson way. I chose MIT. They wanted me to study business or law, something that would set me up for a respectable career in finance or politics. I chose engineering. And here's the part that really drove them crazy. I funded my own education. Worked 3 jobs, took out student loans, refused their money. I spent my weekends waiting tables and my summers doing construction work while my classmates were interning at their parents' companies. Because I knew that if I took their help, it would come with strings attached. Expectations I wasn't ready to meet. A debt I'd never be able to repay. The disappointed look started early. Family dinners became exercises in endurance. My father would ask about my grades, then compare them to James's achievements. My mother would wonder aloud why I couldn't be more like Sarah, more focused on the right kind of future. After graduation, I landed a job at a healthcare tech startup making $65,000 a year. To my family, that was embarrassing. My brother was pulling in 7 figures straight out of business school, and here I was making what my mother spends on handbags in a month. But I loved it. I was building something, creating technology that actually helped people. Working with doctors and nurses to solve real problems, instead of just moving money around to make rich people richer. The comments at family gatherings got sharper. When are you going to get a real job, Maya? When are you going to stop playing around with computers and do something meaningful? When are you going to make us proud? On the side, I started working on my own project. A platform that would revolutionize how medical data gets shared between healthcare providers. I called it SecureWell. The idea came to me after watching my grandfather struggle with a medical emergency. 3 different hospitals, 3 different record systems, and none of them could talk to each other. It took hours to get his medical history hours that could have saved his life. I knew there had to be a better way. To my family, it was just another one of Maya's little hobbies. Something to keep me busy until I came to my senses and joined the real world. My father would literally roll his eyes when I mentioned it at dinner. For 3 years, I poured everything into that hobby. Every spare minute, every extra dollar, every ounce of energy I had. I assembled a team of brilliant people who believed in the vision engineers and designers who were just as frustrated with the healthcare system as I was. We worked out of a cramped office space in Cambridge that smelled like coffee and broken dreams. No fancy furniture, no corporate perks, just a bunch of people who wanted to change the world, one line of code at a time. The early days were brutal. 18-hour workdays, ramen noodle dinners, sleeping on the office couch more nights than I care to admit. While my siblings were attending galas and buying luxury cars, I was debugging code at 2 in the morning and pitching to investors who thought I was too young, too inexperienced, too naive. But slowly, very slowly, it started working. Hospitals began using our platform. Patient outcomes improved. We started getting recognition in healthcare journals, and the numbers started looking really, really good. Then 3 weeks ago, at 3 in the morning, my phone rang. I was exhausted, barely functioning on 4 hours of sleep a night for the past month. We were in the middle of closing our Series B funding round, and every day brought new challenges, new obstacles, new reasons to doubt myself. But when I saw Lucas Reed's name on my screen, my COO and the smartest business mind I'd ever worked with, I knew something big was happening. "Maya, you sitting down," he said. His voice was shaking, and Lucas never gets emotional about anything. "Lucas, it's 3 a.m. What's going on? SoftBank just called. They want in. They want in big time." I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. SoftBank, one of the biggest investment firms in the world, the company that had funded Uber WeWork and dozens of other unicorns. "What are you talking about? 45 million Maya? They're offering 45 million for a 15% stake." I had to ask him to repeat that number 3 times. $45 million. That put our company's valuation at $120 million. $120 million. The family hobby, the thing my parents dismissed as a phase, had just become worth more than my father's entire investment portfolio. I hung up the phone and just sat there in the dark, trying to process what had just happened. All those years of doubt, all those family dinners where I felt like the failure, all those times I wondered if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. And the best part, they still had no idea. I kept that phone call to myself. Didn't tell a soul, because I knew that in just a few days I'd be sitting around that family dinner table, listening to them tell me once again how I needed to get my life together. And I was going to let them. I was going to sit there and take it one more time before everything changed forever. So there I was 3 days later, standing outside the family estate with a $30 bottle of wine from CVS and a secret worth $120 million. The Thompson family home is one of those colonial mansions that screams old money. Built in 1847, passed down through 4 generations, the kind of place that gets featured in architectural magazines. Walking up those stone steps always felt like entering a museum, where I was the exhibit that didn't quite belong. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. Even though I'd grown up here, I'd learned years ago that showing up to family dinners required the same formality as visiting strangers. My mother opened the door and I could see her eyes immediately scan my outfit. Black jeans, a simple white blouse, and a blazer I'd bought on sale 3 years ago. Not exactly the designer ensemble she was hoping for. "Maya, dear," she said, giving me one of those air kisses that doesn't actually touch your face. "How nice that you could make it." The way she said it, you'd think I was doing them a favor by showing up to my own family dinner. I walked into the dining room and it was like stepping back in time. The same mahogany table that could seat 12, the same crystal chandelier that probably cost more than most people's cars, the same oil paintings of dead relatives staring down at us with disapproving expressions. My father was already seated at the head of the table checking his phone. He looked up just long enough to give me a nod that felt more like a business acknowledgement than a greeting from a parent. "Maya," he said, "good to see you." James was there with his wife, both of them looking like they'd stepped out of a Ralph Lauren catalog. Sarah was there too, practically glowing with that engagement ring that could blind someone from across the room. And then there was Aunt Helena. Helena is my father's younger sister, and she's always been the black sheep before I claimed the title. Never married, spent her 20s traveling the world instead of climbing corporate ladders, and has this way of seeing right through the family's pretenses. She was the only one who got up to actually hug me. "There's my favorite entrepreneur," she whispered in my ear. "How's the world-changing business going?" I smiled. Helena was the only one who'd ever asked about my work like it actually mattered. We sat down, and the familiar dance began. My mother started with the safe topics, talking about the weather and some charity auction she was organizing. But I could feel the judgment in the air, thick as the expensive perfume my mother always wore. Sarah immediately launched into wedding planning mode. "Maya, you have to see the venue we booked. It's this gorgeous estate in the Hamptons. The photos are going to be absolutely stunning." She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through pictures, narrating every detail like she was hosting a home improvement show. The flowers, the catering, the band they'd hired that apparently played at celebrity weddings. James, not to be outdone, started talking about his latest promotion. "The partners voted me into the senior leadership committee last week. Youngest associate they've ever promoted to that level." My mother practically beamed. "James closed a deal worth $200 million last month. $200 million, can you imagine?" And there it was, the number game. In my family, everything came down to numbers. How much money you made, how much your house was worth, how much prestige your job carried. My father leaned back in his chair. "It's good to see the family name maintaining its reputation. Success breeds success, as they say." The conversation continued like this for 20 minutes. Sarah's wedding budget, James's bonus, my mother's latest fundraising triumph. Each story carefully crafted to demonstrate just how well the Thompson family was doing. And then, the spotlight turned to me. "So Maya," my mother said, her voice taking on that tone she used when she was about to deliver what she thought was helpful advice. "How are things going with your little computer project?" Little computer project. That's what she called the company that was about to change healthcare forever. "It's going well," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We're making good progress." My father looked up from his wine glass. "Are you making any money yet?" "I mean real money, not just enough to pay rent," James chimed in. "Maya, if you ever want to transition into something more stable, I have connections at several firms. With your technical background, you could probably land a decent analyst position." Decent analyst position. Like that was the height of ambition for someone like me. "That's very kind of you to offer," I said, "but I'm happy where I am." The looks they exchanged, those little glances that said everything they were thinking, but too polite to say out loud. Poor Maya, still chasing her dreams, instead of facing reality. Aunt Helena caught my eye from across the table and gave me a subtle wink. She was the only one who seemed to understand that there might be more to my story than they realized. But here's what none of them knew. While they were sitting there measuring success by traditional standards, talking about deals and bonuses and social status, I was sitting on news that would change everything. The phone in my pocket felt like it was burning a hole through my jeans, because I knew that any minute now Lucas was going to call with an update that would turn this entire dinner upside down, and I couldn't wait. Then came the moment I'd been dreading and somehow expecting all at the same time. My father set down his wine glass with that deliberate precision he used when he was about to deliver what he considered important news. The conversation around the table died as everyone sensed the shift in energy. "Maya," he said, his voice taking on that boardroom tone I'd heard him use with underperforming employees. "Your mother and I have been discussing your situation." My situation, like I was a problem that needed to be solved. I could feel my heart starting to race, but I kept my face neutral. This was it, the conversation I'd been preparing for my entire adult life. "We've been patient. We've been supportive. But frankly, we're concerned about the direction your life is taking." Supportive. That was rich. When had they ever supported anything I'd done? You're 29 years old and you're still playing around with this startup fantasy. Meanwhile, your siblings are building real careers, making real contributions to society. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Even she seemed to sense that this was going too far. James, on the other hand, was nodding along like this was exactly the intervention I needed. But my father wasn't done. He was just getting started. Your brother James just closed a $200 million deal. Your sister Sarah is about to marry into one of the most influential families in Massachusetts. They're making the Thompson name mean something. He paused, looking directly at me with those cold blue eyes that had intimidated me as a child. And what are you doing? Wasting your MIT education on some pipe dream that's never going to amount to anything real. The words hit like physical blows. Every insecurity I'd ever had about my choices, every moment of doubt I'd pushed down came rushing back to the surface. So, we've made a decision, he continued. We're cutting off your allowance effective immediately. And frankly, we're reconsidering your place in the family trust. The words hit the table like a bomb. My mother was nodding along as if this was some kind of tough love intervention that would finally set me straight. Richard, Aunt Helena said quietly, this is going too far. Helena, this is family business, my mother snapped. Maya needs to understand that actions have consequences. Actions have consequences. Like choosing to follow my passion instead of their expectations was some kind of moral failing. Until you start behaving like a Thompson, my father continued, his voice getting louder. Until you start making choices that reflect the values this family stands for. Until you prove that you can contribute something meaningful to this family's legacy, you're on your own. The room was dead silent. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, counting down the seconds until my life was supposed to fall apart. I could hear my mother's jewelry clinking as she adjusted her necklace nervously. James looked smug, like he was watching his biggest competitor get eliminated from the game. Sarah looked mortified, but she wasn't saying anything to defend me. Here's the thing they didn't understand. I'd been on my own for years. I'd never touched their allowance, never counted on their money, never built my life around their approval. I'd worked 3 jobs to pay for college, slept on friends' couches during internships, and built my company with my own sweat and savings. But hearing it said out loud, hearing my own father essentially disown me in front of the whole family, it still stung. It still felt like that little girl who just wanted her parents to be proud of her was getting her heart broken all over again. I looked around the table. James was trying not to smile. My mother was studying her manicure like it contained the secrets of the universe. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Aunt Helena looked furious, her hands clenched into fists. And me? I just sat there, surprisingly calm, almost peaceful actually, because for the first time in my life, they'd finally been honest about how they really felt about me. Is that how you really feel? I asked quietly, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. It's how we felt for a long time, my mother said, her voice taking on that martyred tone she used when she thought she was doing something difficult but necessary. We just finally decided to do something about it. I nodded slowly, absorbing the finality of it. So if I don't change, if I don't give up my company and become the daughter you want me to be, I'm no longer part of this family. Maya, you're being dramatic, my father said. We're not disowning you. We're giving you motivation to make better choices. Better choices? Right? Okay then, I said, reaching for my water glass and taking a sip. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. They were waiting for me to break down, to beg for forgiveness, to promise I'd change my ways and become the daughter they wanted. The daughter who would marry someone they approved of and work at a job they understood and never ever challenge their vision of what success should look like. Instead, I just sat there drinking my water and processing the fact that I was officially free. That's when my phone rang, the ringtone cut through the silence, like a fire alarm going off in a library. Everyone turned to look at me, and I could see the annoyance flash across my father's face. In the Thompson household, phones were meant to be silenced during dinner. It was one of those unspoken rules that everyone followed without question. I looked at the screen. Lucas Reed. My heart skipped a beat. Lucas knew I was at family dinner. He would never call unless it was absolutely critical. I should take this, I said, starting to stand up. Maya, my mother started, her voice sharp with disapproval. We're in the middle of a family discussion. I know, I said, my hand already on the phone. But this could be important. More important than your family, my father asked, his voice dripping with the kind of sarcasm that was supposed to make me feel guilty. I looked at him for a long moment. We'll find out. I walked a few steps away from the table, but not far enough that they couldn't hear. Something told me they were about to want to hear this conversation. Lucas, I answered, my voice professional but warm. What's going on? His voice was loud enough that I knew everyone could hear him, and honestly, I didn't lower the volume. Maya, I hope you're sitting down. I just got off the phone with SoftBank. It's official. They're in for $45 million. I could feel the energy in the room shift. My family had gone from annoyed to curious in about half a second. $45 million, I repeated, making sure everyone heard every syllable. That puts our valuation at $120 million, Maya. $120 million. And here's the best part. They want to restructure your role. They're calling you Founder Emeritus. You'll maintain control of the company vision while we bring in operational support for the next growth phase. Founder Emeritus. The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. I could hear my father's chair creak as he leaned forward. My mother had stopped pretending to look at her nails. James looked like someone had just told him gravity was optional. Lucas, I said, my voice steady as steel, can you repeat that valuation number one more time? I want to make sure I heard you correctly. $120 million, Maya. Your company is worth $120 million. And after the Series C funding that SoftBank is projecting, we're looking at a pre-IPO valuation that could hit $250 million within 18 months. $250 million. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. My little computer project, my hobby, the thing they'd been telling me to give up for 3 years, was worth more than my father's entire portfolio. More than James's lifetime earnings. More than everything they'd spent decades building combined. And they'd just finished telling me I wasn't good enough to be part of their family. I watched their faces transform in real time. It was like watching a movie where someone hits rewind and then fast forward all at once. My father's expression went from disappointment to confusion, to something that looked like he was trying to solve a complex math problem in his head. My mother's mouth was literally hanging open. James looked like someone had just told him his entire career was a participation trophy. Lucas, I said, walking back toward the table with the phone still pressed to my ear. Let me put you on speaker so I can take notes. But really, I wanted everyone to hear what came next. Maya, are you sure this sounds like a family dinner? And I know how you feel about mixing business with family. It's fine, I said, hitting the speaker button. They just became very interested in my business. Lucas's voice filled the dining room. Okay, so here's where we stand. SoftBank wants to close by end of week. The board structure we discussed is solid. You maintain controlling interests and final say on all major decisions. No outside investors get cap table changes without your approval. I could see my father leaning forward, and I knew exactly what he was thinking. This was the language he understood. Controlling interest, cap table, board structure. And the pre-IPO timeline? I asked, making sure my voice stayed perfectly professional. 18 months, maybe less if we hit the growth targets we projected. Maya, we're looking at a company that could be worth $500 million by 2027. $500 million. You could have heard a pin drop in that dining room. I ended the call and slipped my phone back into my pocket. Then I looked around the table at my family, who were all staring at me like I'd just revealed I was actually an alien from another planet. Well, I said, sitting back down and picking up my fork like nothing had happened. Where were we? My mother was the first to recover. You could literally see the wheels turning in her head, calculating and recalculating everything she thought she knew about me. Maya, honey, she said, her voice suddenly warm in a way it hadn't been all evening. Why didn't you tell us how well your company was doing? Honey. She hadn't called me honey in about 5 years. You never asked, I said simply. My father cleared his throat. Maya, this is significant news. We should discuss how the family can support this venture. Support? That was a good one. Actually, Dad, I said, 5 minutes ago you were cutting me out of the family because I wasn't behaving like a Thompson. Now, you want to discuss support? James jumped in, probably sensing an opportunity. Maya, look, I think we all got a little heated, but this is incredible news. With the family's connections, we could really help you scale this thing. Scale this thing. Like I hadn't been scaling it just fine without them for 3 years. Sarah, who had been silent through most of this, finally spoke up. Maya, this could be amazing for the family profile. Imagine the PR opportunities. A Thompson revolutionizing healthcare. The press would eat that up. And there it was. They weren't excited for me. They weren't proud of what I'd accomplished. They were excited about what my success could do for them. I looked around the table and felt something I'd never experienced before in that room. Complete and total clarity. Let me ask you something, I said, my voice calm but cutting. If Lucas hadn't called tonight, if you didn't know about SoftBank or the valuation or any of it, would you still be cutting me off? Would you still be telling me I'm not good enough to be part of this family? The silence was deafening. Because here's what's interesting to me, I continued. 10 minutes ago, I was a disappointment who needed to get her life together. Now I'm someone you want to support and leverage for PR opportunities. My mother started to speak, but I held up my hand. You want to know why I never told you about the company's success because I knew this would happen. I knew that the minute money was involved, the minute there was something you could benefit from, suddenly I'd become worthy of your attention. My father tried his boardroom voice again. Maya, you're being emotional. This is business. Family business. We could bring significant value to your company. What value? I asked. Your connections. Your money. Your expertise. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Not a happy smile. A knowing smile. Dad, my company just raised more money in one round than your firm made in profit last year. My connections include the biggest healthcare systems in the country and the most powerful tech investors in the world. And my expertise? Well, it just created something worth $120 million. The room was so quiet, I could hear my mother's jewelry clinking as she fidgeted with her necklace. So, here's what's going to happen, I said, standing up from the table. Thank you for the offer to support my venture, but I'll pass. Thank you for the offer to help with connections and PR, but I'll pass on that too. I looked directly at my father. And thank you for cutting me off from the allowance and the inheritance. Honestly, you just saved me the trouble of turning it down myself. Aunt Helena was smiling now, actually smiling like she was watching her favorite movie. Maya, my mother said, her voice taking on a pleading tone I'd never heard before. You're family, we're family, we should be working together. You're right, I said. We are family, but for the past 10 years you've made it very clear that being family comes with conditions. Tonight you told me I didn't meet those conditions. I picked up my purse and my $30 bottle of wine that nobody had bothered to open. The beautiful thing about building your own success is that you get to choose who you share it with. And I choose to share it with people who believed in me before they knew what I was worth. I walked toward the door, then turned back one more time. Oh, and just so we're clear, when SecureWell goes public and my net worth gets announced in Forbes, I don't want to see any quotes from the family about how proud you are, because we both know that's not the truth. The last thing I heard as I walked out was Aunt Helena starting to clap. I walked out of that house feeling lighter than I had in years. But I wasn't alone. Aunt Helena caught up with me in the driveway, car keys in hand, and the biggest smile I'd ever seen on her face. Maya Thompson, she said, that was the most beautiful thing I've witnessed in 30 years of family dinners. Helena, you don't have to leave because of me. Are you kidding? She laughed. I've been waiting my whole life for someone to tell this family the truth. I'm buying you dinner somewhere that doesn't require reservations and doesn't judge you for ordering wine that costs less than a car payment. Lucas met us at a little diner in Cambridge, the kind of place where the coffee comes in thick white mugs and nobody cares if you talk them business over burgers and fries. We stayed there until 2 in the morning, planning our future and laughing about how my family's faces had looked when reality hit them. 6 months later, everything changed. The IPO launched on a Tuesday morning in October. I remember standing on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange watching our stock ticker symbol appear on the big board for the first time. SecureWell had gone public at a valuation of $250 million. $250 million. The number was so big it didn't feel real. I owned 42% of that company, which meant that on paper I was worth more than $100 million. But you know what felt better than the money? The messages. Hundreds of them from doctors and nurses and patients whose lives had been improved by our platform. Healthcare systems that had cut their data processing time in half. Families who'd gotten faster, better care because medical records could finally talk to each other. That's when I knew what I wanted to do with this success. I set up the Thomson Tech Foundation that same month. Our mission was simple: provide coding education and mentorship to underprivileged girls who wanted careers in STEM. Girls who came from families that didn't understand their dreams. Girls who needed someone to believe in them before they proved themselves. The foundation's first office was in East Boston in a community center that served kids whose parents worked 2 jobs just to pay rent. We started with 20 girls, ages 12 to 18, teaching them everything from basic programming to entrepreneurship. One of our first students was a 15-year-old named Maria, whose parents had immigrated from El Salvador. She'd been building websites for local businesses out of her bedroom for 2 years, but her family thought it was a waste of time. They wanted her to focus on traditional careers, stable careers, safe careers. Sound familiar? When Maria's first app got accepted into the Apple Store, her parents cried. Not because they suddenly understood technology, but because they finally understood that their daughter had a gift. 3 weeks after the IPO, I got a call from my mother. "Maya, we'd like to have a celebration dinner for your success. The whole family, maybe some press. It would be wonderful for everyone to see how proud we are." I almost laughed out loud. "That's very kind of you to offer," I told her, "but I'm planning my own celebration." And I did. We rented out the community center where the foundation was based, invited all my employees, the girls from our program, Aunt Helena Lucas, and every person who'd believed in me when I was just a stubborn kid with a crazy idea. No designers' gowns, no crystal chandeliers, no photographers from society magazines, just real people celebrating something real. My family did get an invitation, though. A very simple one that read, "Maya Thompson requests the pleasure of your company at a celebration of SecureWell's public offering and the launch of the Thomson Tech Foundation. Casual dress encouraged. RSVP appreciated but not required." They didn't come, and honestly, I wasn't surprised. But you know who did come? Maria and her parents. The team that had worked 18-hour days in that cramped office in Cambridge. The nurses who'd called to tell us how our platform had helped save lives. Lucas gave a speech that night about how success isn't measured by how high you climb, but by how many people you lift up along the way. And Helena raised a toast to stubborn dreamers and the courage to prove people wrong. And me, I stood up in front of that room full of people who'd supported me, believed in me, and worked alongside me, and I realized something. I had gotten everything my family said I'd never have. The money, the recognition, the respect, the success they'd measured their whole lives by. But more importantly, I'd built a life I was proud of. A life surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not what I was worth. A life where my success could create opportunities for girls who reminded me of myself. A life where I didn't need anyone's permission to be exactly who I was meant to be. And that honestly felt better than any family approval ever could. So here's what I learned from becoming the family disappointment who built a $250 million company. Real success isn't about getting approval from people who never believed in you in the first place. It's not about proving them wrong, though that can feel pretty amazing. And it's definitely not about the money, even when the money is life-changing. Real success is about impact. It's about authenticity. It's about building something that matters with people who matter to you. My family spent decades measuring worth by traditional standards, bank accounts and social status, and whether your achievements looked good in Christmas card updates. But they missed the most important metric of all. Are you proud of who you've become? Not proud because other people are impressed. Not proud because you've accumulated the right symbols of success. But proud because you stayed true to yourself even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. 3 years after that dinner, I still get Christmas cards from my parents. They're polite, formal, and usually include a newspaper clipping about Secure Well or the foundation. Like they're trying to claim credit for something they actively discouraged. James sent me a LinkedIn message last year asking if we had any openings for senior analysts. Turns out, his firm downsized and he was looking for new opportunities. I forwarded his resume to HR with a note that said, "Please give this the same consideration you'd give any other applicant." Sarah actually reached out after her divorce. Her political powerhouse husband turned out to be not so powerful and not so faithful. She wanted to talk about maybe starting her own law practice and asked if I had any advice about entrepreneurship. I had coffee with her. Because growth is possible for everyone, even people who hurt you. But I didn't offer her funding or connections or any special treatment. I told her the same thing I tell every entrepreneur: if you want to build something meaningful, be prepared to do it without anyone's permission. Aunt Helena and I have dinner every month now. She says, watching me walk away from that family dinner was the most inspiring thing she'd ever witnessed. She's been traveling more, writing, more living, more authentically. She says, I reminded her that it's never too late to stop seeking approval from people who will never understand you. The foundation now serves over 300 girls across 5 cities. We've had 12 of our students get full scholarships to top engineering programs. 4 have started their own companies. And Maria, the 15-year-old whose parents didn't understand her gift, she just got accepted to MIT with a full ride. Last week, she sent me a text that said, "Thank you for showing me that family approval is optional, but self-respect isn't." That's when I knew everything had been worth it. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you're the one in your family who doesn't fit the mold, if you're tired of waiting for permission to be yourself, let me tell you something. You don't need their approval. You never did. You need your own courage, your own vision, and your own willingness to build the life that makes sense to you. Everything else is just noise. So what's your story? Have you ever had to choose between family approval and personal authenticity? Drop a comment and let me know. And if this resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the best thing you can do for the people who don't believe in you is prove that their belief was never required in the first place. Thanks for listening to my story. Now go write your own. If this story hit home for you, smash that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, have you ever had to choose between family approval and staying true to yourself? I read every single comment, and your story might be the next one I tell. Thanks for watching. And remember, you don't need anyone's permission to be successful.